Stay Sober. My name is Vinny. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
I'm Sam. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
I'm Chris. I'm an alcoholic.
My man. And we are live. We're a traveling podcast, and we are live right now in Devon, Pennsylvania, about 30 miles outside Philadelphia.
Not our first time doing a podcast here. This is our second, Devon.
Right?
This is our second. Pastor Jay was in the same building, let alone the same zip code.
What a story.
We are in a different room.
It probably felt like a whole nother place, but we're in the same building.
We are in the same building.
It did feel totally different.
Mm-hmm.
We are actually in the studio of a different podcast hosted by my friend and our guest, Chris Woods here. We are in the Pain with a Purpose podcast studio right now.
Pain with a podcast. Pain with a purpose. Excuse me.
Pain with a podcast.
Check out that podcast. Chris does an incredible job on all major platforms. It's Pain with a Purpose. Check it out. Sam?
So, I mean, I've been thinking about having you on for like a long time, but I know you're incredibly busy. You have a job, a family, and now several new business ventures. Mm-hmm. You got a lot going on. Every night I talk to you, you seem to be going somewhere else, and all I can think to myself is like, how does this guy's wife put up with this? That's like all I think when I see it. Like when I see you like down at Roman's basketball game, I'm like, oh, Cal's got to be pissed. You know what I mean? Like that's where my head goes in today's world, because we're both in a very similar spot with our careers and our families. But it is with my great pleasure to introduce my friend, longtime coworker, longtime friend, Chris Woods. Chris Woods, how we doing?
Thanks for having me on, dude.
Dude, thanks for coming on.
Hard to follow it up with like, yeah, she's not pissed. I'm sure she is.
Yeah.
But you know, that's like the gift of having somebody that like kind of understands. I'm very much a busy individual, so you know.
We are blessed.
She's
to have
a great
the spouses that
you got
we
a
have,
good egg, dude.
To be honest with you, all three of us, really.
Yeah.
We're nothing without our wives.
Well, she has her Monday nights too, right? So like, start calling me on Monday nights because I'm definitely not busy that day.
Yeah.
Because that's when she's at her women's meeting.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'm always home that night.
She still goes to that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Most recently,
Bucks? No. Most recently, she got relocated. Not relocated, but
she got relocated.
She got linked up with like these really strong women in like Wayne area.
Where we are now. Yeah, pretty much.
Right next to it.
Yeah, she has a good group around her, and actually it's pretty cool. Dan Garrity. It's not a women's meeting. Dan Garrity goes to the same meeting.
What night? Oh, Monday
nights. Yep.
I mean, I kind of sort of got sober out in this area, so I wonder if I know what it is. But I can't really think of one that I attended out here on Monday nights. I think Monday nights I was more like in the Westchester area.
Could even be Chesterbrook. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I also think like in the amount of we look at 12-step fellowship, right? Like meetings are like the stock market. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I remember, and I'll talk about this later, like Woods in COVID, basically I'm going to say started and like roped me into this meeting that was started as basically a counter to virtual 12-step fellowship. And
it was in person?
It was in person.
Nice.
It was in 2020 into 2021.
Good.
We would meet in this church in Bridgeport, Pennsylvania, and it was hot. It was like the summertime. It was hot as balls. And it was just like us in there talking about the book to guys that had just gotten out of treatment. Like fresh out of treatment, where they were given minimal exposure to like what it was really about. You know what I mean?
Really?
Yeah, they like thought the extent of recovery was going on to some intensive outpatient on their phones, and that they could just show up to a meeting and it was like that. Like it was like a checklist. You know what I mean? And then you have a guy like Chris Woods, who I will say knows the book and has such a beautiful way of talking about the book, up at the front of the room. And just breaking it down and making this way of life look so attractive.
I mean, I can't imagine being those guys, right? Because we got sober the way that we did.
Yeah.
But like, if I didn't know until I knew. So imagine like coming out thinking that it was going to be very much just like going to outpatient, whatever. And I'm like, it's not a matter of if you drink again. It's literally a matter of time. So like, what are we really talking about? And they were like, you can't say that. I'm like, well, it's not my words. It's literally so in the book.
You can't say that to me.
It's literally in the book.
Yeah.
And it was like, I can't imagine how many guys are still sober that came through that meeting. I mean, I didn't know I needed that group and then, you know, of course, Natalie was born, and I have this great habit of growing away from AA whenever I have another kid. But that group, like, probably saved my life and like managed to keep me sober in that period of time. And I credit it all to you. Like he dragged me out there. He was like, you got to come to this meeting. And then I brought another friend of mine, our friend Max, and it just became this like kind of really magical thing. Tuesday nights it was, right?
Tuesday.
It was Tuesday nights at the Ukrainian church in Bridgeport, PA. And it was the best.
Is that meeting no more?
So that specific meeting's no more. The home group itself has kind of transformed into something else. They do more like 12 and 12 stuff and things of that nature. But yeah, I've yet to be like, I kind of stopped going at some point, and then.
Well, it goes back to why I brought it up is like meetings are like the stock market. Like that meeting was probably there well before we ever went there, and it'll be there well after us. The message that it carries greatly is
not the same.
It's greatly, influenced by who goes, right?
Yeah, right.
And who's bringing other alcoholics out. And that's like why I think it's funny. Like I know right now, and I'm gonna kind of kick it over to Chris in a minute, but it's like Kel, his wife. Like I know for a fact, not to disclose her anonymity, but like you guys got sober out in Bucks. You got sober out in Levittown. You know what I mean? So to hear Kel, who's 13 years sober?
No, she's got 11.
She's got 11 years sober. To hear her, they live in King of Prussia, to find a new group in this area when she was like such a titan out in Bucks, which to me feels like, basically Bucks County to me feels like New Jersey. Like it's a hike. Like I got to sit in traffic to get there. I got to sit on the turnpike for 40 minutes and you could not get me out there.
That's tough.
Easily. You know what I mean? So to hear that she kind of relocated around here and like found her own group on Monday nights at 11 years sober with twin daughters and a husband that's got a podcast, a media company, and a full-time job is a blessing to my heart.
I mean, listen, sounds great, right? But like on the front end, but
right.
like you know us, right? And Vinny, I'm sure you're the same way. It's like I'm not gonna like throw my wife's shit out there completely, but anybody that's a real alcoholic knows that like we don't just do that because we're just happy-go-lucky. Right?
No, yeah.
Like we got to be in like a certain amount of pain to be like, okay, now I got to get linked up around here because I've let this go on long enough.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kudos to her for actually like
my shit is on display,
putting up with my shit, and eventually being like, I'm going back because I don't want to be around you anymore, or whatever it was, right? So sounds good on the front end, but we usually have to like find enough pain to be like, okay, I'll go back to what works.
That's what happens to me every time. I talk about it on the podcast all the time. About every 2 or 3 years, I start calling the shots again, and then I do some outlandish, self-centered bullshit, and I crawl back in AA. And every single time, I'm like, I've done it like maybe 2 or 3 times, and I crawl back in, and I'm always like, oh my God, how did I ever think that it was okay to start calling the shots again? How did I ever think that?
It's a very interesting.
And then I get reconnected, and you know what? I'll probably do it again. I'll probably do it again in like 2 or 3 years. It'll probably happen again, and God willing, I don't drink.
It's a really interesting point, right? Because Vinny, you've been sober probably longer than I've been alive.
38 and a half years, roughly.
Right, so longer than we've both been alive, right? Has that been the same thing for you, or like have you been consistent the whole time? Because like
I feel like I've been very consistent. When I got out of treatment in, I guess it was September of '86. I did a lot of meetings, step work, sponsor, but then you kind of grow away from it. Then you get back to it. Then you grow away from it a little bit and you back to it. So it's kind of cyclical for me. I'm in one of those periods right now where I'm not completely plugged in, but I still feel okay. I'm not like freaked out, to where you could feel like, okay, this is craziness. I need to get back, totally back. But you come every couple of years or every few years or whatever, you get that, I'm going to do everything my way and think my way and do it. And it's just got to take a pause, take a step back.
And it explodes. So with that, we kind of went on a tangent there for a minute. I don't even know. I guess I have probably heard your entire story through bits and pieces, just us being friends for like the last 10 years or so. But I've never heard it in chronological order. So with what you care to share, us even also growing up kind of in relatively the same area, start from the beginning, bro. Tell me about the Ballad of Chris Woods.
So a little bit of experience, strength, and hope.
A little
type
experience,
deal.
strength, and hope for the people.
Sure.
Yeah,
Please.
so I mean, it would be weird if I didn't say it again, right? But I'm Chris. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Chris.
Chris.
And essentially, yeah. I mean, I think this is more like kind of like a cooler way to go about it, right? Because even though the format's very much like whatever, it's still a meeting essentially. So
I call it a meeting in your pocket.
literally,
Can't get out of work, whatever. Go on our website or our site, click it, listen to it. So you're basically at a speaker meeting, basically.
I love that because it's also 2025, right?
Yep.
So there's definitely a lot of people. So I'm gonna get comfy then.
Yeah,
Please
absolutely.
do, buddy.
So so I grew up much like you kind of alluded to in like Roxborough, Manayunk. Really, it was Germantown, right? But I didn't like to tell people
It's
that.
really Bluebell Hill.
Bluebell
if
Hill.
you know, you know. He grew up in Bluebell Hill. It's very, very
But I
small.
de-
Right.
definitely
I'm not
didn't
from
like-
South Philly. I'm from Greater South Philly Heights.
You're from? Is that what
no,
they call
it's not
that?
a thing, man. No, it's not a thing. I'm just kidding.
sounded better.
Yeah, it
does.
It sounds really cool.
He's like right on the edge of Packer. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, grew up in a loving family. I didn't know that at the time, right? Hindsight's 2020, but we'll get into all that. But it was my mom and my grandparents that raised me. My mom, God bless her. I mean, literally
She's the best.
would work multiple jobs to put me through like Catholic school at the time, and like my very early childhood. She would. I went to Norwood Fontbonne in Chestnut Hill, and Norwood Fontbonne, for anybody that's not aware, they don't like tell you that your son's kicked out. They kind of like have a meeting and they're like, "Hey, your son's not a fit for us anymore."
Oh,
He won't be welcome back next
yeah.
year. That's what they say.
clean out your desk.
Yeah.
Much like a really structured recovery house, right? Like rent was paid, you still got asked to leave.
Yeah.
So I didn't fit the mold.
It's a great comparison.
So I felt different very early on, and back then it wasn't because of like, for me it was like all monetary stuff, right? So it was all, a lot of my schoolmates then were getting dropped off in like a brand new vehicle, whether it be a brand new Ford or most likely like a brand new Mercedes. I was getting dropped off in like the car that was like falling apart, windows didn't go down, whatever. But God bless my mom. She did everything in her power to put me through the best possible scenario. My mom ended up getting remarried. We moved to Florida briefly, which again, hindsight's 2020. But she asked me straight up. She was like, "Hey, would you be okay with moving to Florida?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever."
How old were you?
I was in 5th grade, going into 6th.
I always forget about this. Yeah.
Yeah. So my stepfather, his name was Chris. My brother's name was Chris. I'm Chris. So when we all migrated down there, it was a little weird for a second there.
How did you have a brother named Chris?
So
was it
his
a
son,
stepbrother?
Stepbrother named
Oh,
Chris.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense now.
Yeah. So the reason why I bring up Chris and not so much the whole idea of Florida is, Chris was everything that I wasn't. Right. Chris was like a really good student. Chris was like, had like in the book they say like a host of friends. Right. At least that's what I perceived. At the time, he was at like Archbishop Carroll, somewhat athletic, but like really, really book smart. And I was the complete opposite. I was just like only cared about sports, could care less about school. The only reason I went to school is because if I started to like fail, right, essentially, I wouldn't be able to play. So I looked up to Chris in many ways. It didn't work out in Florida. We moved back. When we moved
They
back,
were
Everybody
from
moved back?
Philly. They weren't like a Florida troop.
no,
The other
no,
Chris's.
not at all.
Chris
And-
B and C weren't from Florida. They were
and
Philly guys.
Life coming full circle, I didn't know that my stepfather and my mom were going to work at a treatment center.
Really?
Yeah,
Were
so
they?
they were doing UR down there. Yep.
No way.
That's for a whole nother episode.
I never knew that either. That's something crazy.
Yeah, so
How about that?
which is even crazier because like my father or stepfather, right, should have absolutely been in recovery, but wasn't.
Oh, okay.
But it was his brother that, had like, co-founder, whatever. So it didn't work out there. We came back. When I came back, I only went to school for about a half a year. So when I went back to a Catholic school, or when I was in Florida, I was in public. But when I went back to a Catholic school, they were like, "Yeah, I only did school for half a year. So if you want to go to like the next grade, you got to take this test." I failed it miserably because I just
man.
don't care. I actually was probably much like your first regular pop quiz. I just signed my name and just guessed.
Yeah.
didn't think that like, there was ever any consequences
or repercussions to what that test.
So they put my ass back in 6th grade again.
Oh man.
So, and then, much like growing up in the neighborhood, like all these kids that I was now older than, I see them all the time. I play sports with them all the time. I'm actually in the grade above them in all the sports, but now I'm in their class. So kids can be vicious, right? Like that's when the name calling started, right? They call me Billy Madison. My ears were the same size back then as they are now. I was a sensitive kid.
Oh, man.
So that's how grade school kind of was, right?
They called you Billy Madison?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Them bastards.
Well, even when I was at Roman, so fast forward to Roman, I was in 3rd track. I was in 3rd track for everything.
Yeah.
So I was like a 2-sport varsity athlete, like literally like one of like the least motivated kids in class, even in 3rd track. So really just kind of like scraping by.
Just getting through.
Yeah. But to tie it all together, probably very early on in my 8th grade to freshman summer, Chris, a little bit older than me, whatever, I got introduced to. We were drinking and maybe smoking some weed back then, but we were watching a movie. I remember vividly. We were watching a movie as a family, my stepdad, him, my mom, and myself. And he shot me a text and he was like, hey, do you want to try Vicodin? Right? And like the relationship that we had, that wasn't like an out of control text message to get. But I was like, nah, I'm good. Like, really, why would I try that? And he was like, dude, I'm telling you, like, we're not doing anything. You'll love it. I don't think he ever meant to like put me in harm's way or anything like that. And again, I was like, okay, let's do it. Right. So eventually, he probably put it upstairs. I went upstairs, I grabbed it, I did it, whatever. 45 minutes later, I'm throwing up in the toilet.
Oh my God.
Again, hindsight being 2020, any other like a normal human being that doesn't suffer the way that we do, their thought would have been like, I'm never doing this
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
My thought was like, as soon as I'm done throwing up, like this sucks at the moment, but I found it. Like this is it. Like
We had arrived. Yeah.
If I can feel like this forever, we're good. So then, very early on into high school, and in high school, my high school career or whatever, I chased that in every way that I could, and I didn't even know what I really suffered from yet. It was. I don't know. It was interesting to say the least. So I played. My main sport was soccer. I was also talented enough to play on the baseball team, but my main sport was soccer. So I had a varsity schedule at Roman, which meant that like although being a freshman, like I still got done school every day at like 1:40, because you never knew where your game was going to be. You had to get on the bus. I also got held back, like I said, so I already was driving to high school.
Oh my God.
So
That's awesome.
So as a freshman, I'm getting done at 1:40. I have this perk habit that I don't even know is a perk habit yet, and I'm leaving Center City, Broad and Vine, to go back to Roxborough to get whatever I have to get back to either school or by whatever opposing team's field that we were playing at, just so I could play. And it didn't get any better from there, right? So essentially, it progresses slowly but surely. I'm trying to hold on to any type of like reputation that I might have. I start stealing in school. I start borrowing money in school. It's not that Roman like didn't try to like help me or call me out on it. They absolutely did. I do what we do. I manipulated my mom. I was like, hey, listen, like I'm not like these, excuse my French for anybody that might get like upset about it, but like I'm not one of these junkies that's smoking weed and doing all this stuff. Like, Mom, I got hurt. I'm doing perks so I can play.
That's so crazy that you were able to bid that down.
Yeah.
Like to that degree at that age.
Yeah.
That's like some 25-year-old
yeah,
antics
and like
right
that
there.
unconditional love piece. Like my mom was like, okay, let's go. I'm going to go to bat for you.
Yeah.
Right? And they called me into the office, and the disciplinarian, who was like a very serious individual, he was like, we know exactly what you're doing. We know what you're doing with your classmates, yada, yada, yada. They were actually alluding to my good buddy, our good buddy, Jake.
Yeah.
And my mom went right into like protection mode. And she was like, nope. He told me exactly what's going on. I even tried to drug test him. He told me exactly what would come up, yada, yada, yada. And like, what is a disciplinarian to do, right?
It's so funny because like I just think back now to all his classmates calling him Billy Madison like he's not smart. Like that is a concocted set up to be able to get what you want. It
And
just
that was
goes
like
to
a
show you how powerful
seam of the pants lie.
That's crazy.
But that was junior year. From junior year to senior year, I had to run with that lie.
Yeah.
So fast forward to senior year, right after the soccer season, I'm sitting on a surgical table getting ready to go in at Jefferson for surgery on an injury I never had.
Oh my God! You didn't even have the injury.
Insane.
No. So it was, like the red flags were definitely raised early. Unfortunately, I was just like the last to find out. So very early after high school, I was convinced that it was like Sam and all the kids that he had me hanging out with. It's a joke. Nobody actually knows that, but
Yeah.
essentially it was everybody else. It wasn't me.
Of course not.
So I finally got honest with my mom, and at 19, I went into treatment the first time. Went into Miramont within like 48 hours. When I got there and I'm on the detox wing, I'm raising my hand. I don't want to live like this anymore. I'm very much like you. You take me off detox, and I'm on like the payphone that my mom had to pay for, like literally a prepaid card. If anybody remembers that.
Yeah, you called collect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Mom, you got to get me out of here. I'm not like any of these people.
Oh
I
my
get
God.
that. I get that I told you I have an issue, and I absolutely do. I just won't. I'm not going to put that stuff in my body anymore. Furthermore, like, you want me to go to NA, I will. You want me to go to AA, I will. Whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it. But you got to come get me like right now, because I'm leaving.
And she did.
Yeah, she tried to.
You couldn't get home from media back uptown. You had no idea where you were.
Yeah, I did that with my mother.
Yeah.
When I only went to treatment once, and I was just prior to turning 21, and I did that to my mother, and I was 1,000 miles from home.
Yeah.
So I had to stay. I'm not like these people, all that garbage. I was exactly like them, but I was 1,000 miles away. And that's why I like, when I place people in treatment, I do like to get them out of their area so they can't call for a ride,
There is something to kind of advocate for getting help far away from your environment.
Absolutely.
Because there is something changes in the alcoholic addict's mind that when they have to get on an airplane or even like a 4 or 5 hour car ride and they get there, they're like, this is serious. You know what I mean? Because I don't know, my bus stop's not outside. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Like I knew a treatment center that I went to that's actually very close to where we are now. I knew the regional rail line out of SEPTA that I could take to get there. I knew what time the last train left 30th Street Station to get there and the last time they would accept me. And I also knew what time I had to leave that train station to be back at work at the bar by 3:30 p.m. on a Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think that what's really cool about what you guys do, right? We're really not, really what you do, especially with like the Grand Lodge, is like that you have the ability to like have these relationships everywhere. Right?
Yeah, all across the country, really. I deal with like 1,000 locals from like Guam to St. Thomas. So it's like I could really use anywhere I want, and they don't have to go, but
Never.
they always follow what I asked them to do.
Yeah.
Because I basically used myself as that story. I went to treatment one time, 1,000 miles from my home. It was the right fit. And here we are 38 and a half years later. But I always try to use that so my mother couldn't come and get me.
Yeah.
I look at that back in 1986. I say, get me out of here. I'm not like these people. And I think being a really good mother, she would have had I been around the corner, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that unconditional
I'm thankful for that.
Unconditional love, and that's what I talk to families about all the time, not to get like super sidetracked, but like that's like, it's just as powerful as like us wanting to use.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like they know that they shouldn't. My mom picked me up from Miramont Treatment Center bawling her eyes out because like there's no
didn't
picture
feel
about it.
right.
I was AMAing from treatment, right? So my bags
Yeah, you were
on the
getting
curb.
out.
And I wasn't allowed back in the building. So when she pulled up, like she was crying. Again, another vivid like memory that will never leave my like. I would have passed a lie detector. I do not want to do this anymore, Mom. This is different.
Right.
So that was me at 19. I got sober at 23, and I wish I could say that I only went. It would be cool if I only went once a year, right? But I went like every 3 to 6 months
To treatment?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
man.
Brother, that's nothing. I went every other week for like 2 years. Yeah.
So, but that's the thing, right? And the difference is that the people that you deal with, right, are obviously union members, right? Like
Yep.
working professionals. Like I
Yep.
was 19. All I knew was like either what they were telling me in treatment or like if I had a loved one that went, right? So like that stepbrother, right, that for all things considered gave me like the first thing that really worked in my life. He
Which
got
was
sober.
Vicodin.
Yeah.
Oh, he got sober.
He got sober at Miramont. So that's why I went to Miramont as many times as I did. Like kind of like grasping onto this idea that, don't get me wrong, Miramont's great. I love them. It was the first time I did some real serious work on myself, but that's just like all I knew, right? And then I went to Malvern, then I went to Livingston, then I did the whole.
You go to
whatever.
all these. You could practically run the group after a while.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's why you got to do something different.
Yeah.
If you want to see something different.
That's what was interesting about Miramont is they had this group, which it was like all based off of, and I still have yet to like really dive into it, but it was like based off of the Gorski
method, yeah.
Yeah.
which was like relapse prevention for like chronic relapsers. And I'm that guy that comes back into treatment and I'm judging everybody because I'm better than everybody in there. And like in my head, I'm like, look at this. Oh, this guy's really down bad. And I'm in there for my 9th, 10th time
Right.
saying this to myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until my therapist at Miramont was like, Chris, what do you think, dude? Maybe you're sicker than everybody else. And then that's when it kind of clicked. You know, I didn't get sober then either, but like that's when it was like, oh my God, I'm much like sicker than I thought.
I'm the worst one in here.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, I eventually that time actually took one of the suggestions and went to a recovery house. Went up to Bucks County. They were like, you're going to Croydon, Pennsylvania. Being from Roxborough, Manioc, I was like, where's that?
Exactly.
You know?
It's far.
It's
Yeah.
on the other
Yeah.
side of the world.
When
Yeah.
it's really not.
Yeah,
Right?
no, not at all.
You know, we talked about like, a little bit of traffic, but realistically, like it's really not.
Oh, brother, when I went to sober living
Yeah.
in Malvern, I thought they would have a different climate. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like I thought
Exactly.
it was in a different. I
So,
had never. I
it
didn't know
was
what that
wild.
was.
Yeah. So when I got up there, it was very apparent early on that that's like exactly what I had been searching for my entire life, as far as like the brotherhood and everybody trying to like get better and. Excuse me, but I wasn't willing to get rid of like some of these things that I absolutely probably survived on for a number of years. So like the lust issues, like the lying, the cheating, the stealing, a lot of like the character defects. I was just like staying sober, saving face, and essentially living completely different behind closed doors.
Yeah, you were living that dry life, not necessarily the sober life.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you gotta. I always try to watch throwing that sober word around because, I mean, although I haven't had a drink or a drug in a lot of years, all those years aren't sober. They're dry. I'm clean, but sobriety is a state of mind, in my opinion.
I always.
You guys
say,
could probably agree with that.
I always say I will never be more sober than my first 3 years of continuous good sobriety. Like I'll never ever be that sober again because it was literally at that point in time in my life, it was all I had going for me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. You were all in.
I didn't have a career. I mean, for me, I did have one kid, but like my wife now, bless her heart, like had taken over the role there. Like my sole responsibility in life was to get sober,
Yep.
not get dry. Like it was to get
Yeah.
sober. And what that looked like was taking the commitments,
Mm-hmm.
making sure guys were asking me to sponsor them. Like it was my life. I didn't even have a car, and I've spoken at meetings in Maryland. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it was my whole life. And it's just so funny how the gifts show up, like all these things we thought we would never have, whether it's like a mortgage, a family,
Yep.
fun extracurriculars, like going on vacation that requires a plane ride as opposed to just a bus ride down the shore. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like all these things I never thought I have come into play. And
Oh,
like
yeah.
any other good alcoholic, like I'll take them for granted so quickly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I really, really will. And I really think back to how truly pure and happy I was in those first 3 years. And
Yeah.
I just kind of appreciate it now. And I recognize it for what it is.
It's it's an interesting point, and I try to keep it in the forefront of my mind because like my baseline is not that today. Right,
No.
my baseline is like shit. Okay, where's my vape first and foremost?
Right.
Of course, yeah.
And then I'm like,
Where's my new habit?
right, and then I'm like, and then it goes directly to like selfish things, like well, what's going on at work, what's going on here, what's going on there. This part of my life is not where I want it to be, and it's like those first 3 years, right? Like I didn't care about any of that because I was operating on such a higher plane, right? People can say that whatever they want, right? But what I believed in back then is still what I believe today. the issue with me is that I'm so selfish and self-centered that 9 times out of 10, I forget that I prayed for this life. You know. And,
absolutely. That's such a great way to put
Definitely.
it. That's such a good line. I love that. I forget that I prayed for this life.
Yeah. So when I did eventually get sober, so I relapsed in that, or I left the recovery house. Right. We all knew this was coming. I was living dirty, but like I moved back home. I went on a nice run for about 2 months, and then I approached my mom again, and I was like, "Hey, Mom, we're going back." And she was like, "I know." And I was like, "Listen, this time I'm not coming back. Like I cannot. It's not you. You know, you ever have like a bad breakup? It's like, Mom, it's really not you. It's me. It's really, it's really me. Like you."
To think about you saying that to your mother, and she was just probably like, "Okay."
Yeah. Well, she was upset because she's, you know, to this day, she still doesn't truly understand it. Right? She's definitely my biggest cheerleader, but she doesn't understand that, like, you know, she didn't cause this. She can't cure it. Right? It wasn't a matter of like if she loved me too much or too little. So I was like, "Hey, I am not coming back." So I did it all over again, right? Went through the recovery house, got a sponsor. We literally picked up at 4, right? You know, yes, like I did 1, 2, and 3, right? We got on our knees, but like we picked up at 4.
Hell, they give you the first 3.
Right.
The work starts at 4. We know that.
I feel like you should have to say the 3rd step prayer on your knees with another man every time, because that's like a really humbling part.
Yeah, definitely.
Is.
Oh,
it's such a humbling part
well,
of it.
especially because this time around, the guy that I had, you know, asked to be my sponsor was somebody I absolutely hated.
Nice.
Wow.
Because of his Facebook, essentially.
Just
because he was very opinionated on Facebook. He was very opinionated in person. He was very much like, he would tell you exactly about yourself. And it's like, why are you doing this?
We all know that guy in the rooms. Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? Let's give it a shot. And it started from that day, right? We went through 1, 2, and 3. We got up from the 3rd step prayer. We got to like writing on my 4th immediately. And he was like, yo, man, like, not for nothing, you do know what you are, right? And I'm like, a 23-year-old, you know, drug addict that's back on the top bunk. And he's like, no, you're like an AA thief.
You're like a what?
An AA thief.
Thief.
So essentially, like, I come back in, I get like the cool shiny stuff or whatever I think that my reputation needs to be successful, and then, you know, if it works out, great. If not, right? But like, I'm never concerned about the new person. I'm never concerned about.
Yeah.
I'll take the chair position. I'll take the coffee position because you can see me.
Because there's a spotlight involved.
Right.
Yeah.
I got you.
But like, am I like cleaning up the meeting? Am I showing up there early just to like set up the meeting?
Are you talking to that quiet guy in the back corner?
Am I talking to anybody there, or am I just like, is the stepping stones just like a fashion event for me? Right.
Yeah.
And that's like really what it was. My last bout at like truly trying sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was hitting you with the truth, though.
Yeah,
you know.
and that's what I needed.
Might not have liked it.
Yeah,
you know?
And that's exactly what I needed.
Sure.
So we got back into the work. We went through the 9th step. I finally made an amends to my father. Huge resentment against my dad. Right?
Your real dad or your stepdad?
No, my real dad.
Real dad. Okay.
So like the people that raised me were my mom and my grandparents.
Yeah.
But my dad was never really around. And if you would have asked me up until that point, I would have been like, my dad's a scumbag. Anybody I encountered would have been like, oh, you're talking about my dad, Jack? Like, no, he's an asshole. He's never been there for me. Just completely not a son either, right? So, yes, he wasn't a dad, but I also wasn't a son.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime anybody brought his name up around me, I was like, I made sure that
Bad
you knew
mouthing
exactly how I felt.
That's always like that deep resentment that almost defines you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it did for a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I made the amends to my father. He woke up the next day. I woke up the next day. He called me. He had no clue that we even sat down and talked. So then it really became very, very like prevalent.
He had no clue that you guys even talked?
Yeah, so he's like a real deal alcoholic.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah, and
I got you.
You know, it became very real. Like, hey, he's exactly like me. He just doesn't know where the solution is, right? So who am I to badmouth this guy? Who am I to, you know, create narratives that I perceive in my own head to put out there to the world when really he's exactly like me, right? And it says, you know, these people are sick people. How can I be helpful? And that's like at the end of like the whole story with my dad. But
Yeah.
you know, when he ended up, you know, it wasn't like we were just like skipping through life after that. But essentially, my dad was eventually diagnosed with cancer. And because of AA and because of the amends process, I was able to be a son, right? I was able to like sit there by his bedside, you know, as much as I possibly could. Furthermore, I was able to like let him be a grandfather. Like the twins loved him.
You're a dad?
Yeah, we'll get there.
I guess I never really hear you talk about that much. I
What?
mean, I remember hearing you tell me about what ultimately ended up happening, but I didn't know that you had brought the girls
Oh yeah.
around him so much. Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't really put much of it on like social media.
Yeah, of course.
Especially because at the end of there with like chemo and stuff, like he looked horrible.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Especially with like having an alcoholic body, like horrible's not.
This
even
was
the
like
word.
2 years ago, right?
I think it's like 3 or 4.
Wow,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, time goes by.
But yeah, long story short, so through that process, I started to have like a relationship with him and his current wife at the time. But to backtrack a little bit, when I got into sober living, when I got into like a real home group, right, which like at the time, because of my work schedule, was the 12 o'clock midday keys.
Some of those are the best ones, though.
Because it was the only meeting that I could make every single day, right, and absolutely like not miss it. And I knew that I needed it because my life depended on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So like going to that meeting every day with all of these,
By yourself?
Excuse my French, right? But all these old heads, like literally changed my perspective on what was really important in life.
Yeah.
And at that time, as much as like I hated my job or the hourly wage I was getting, whatever, it was about being like a productive member of like society while I was like representing my employer, right? So showing up on time, doing what they asked me to do, not just by like a shitty way, right? Like really actually like pouring, like if you tell me to shovel shit, yo, Chris, go like be the most passionate shit shoveler out there.
Right.
So I started to like adapt that, that mind frame. I love the place that I worked at. Kelly and I got pregnant.
Right.
Kel at the time, who was just starting, my wife now, but was just starting a new job at this place called Recovery Centers of America, and she didn't have active insurance yet. So we went to the Bucks County Women's Clinic and found out that we were pregnant. And then they were like, well, we're not sure, but we think there's more than one in here. And then that's when we found out we were having identical twins.
Wow.
And then that's when I moved home. Right, when I finally,
I remember with that. Yeah.
we were like, "Hey, we got to figure this out." So, Mom, I'm
Third
coming
floor.
home. Yeah,
Third floor. Yeah.
Third floor, no AC, no heat.
Ooh.
And then in the middle of the summer.
It was hot. Because that was like when I met Kel. I was like when I really, she was pregnant. Like when you see a woman pregnant with twins, like it's a different.
Yeah, it's big.
It's a different.
Yeah, she didn't show it all.
And you move.
Yeah.
And you
I'm sure.
knock it off wood.
So you guys moved to the top of your mom's house?
Yep.
Big
Third
house.
floor?
Yeah.
Third floor.
No heat? No air conditioning?
So there was heat.
Okay.
That was more for like the story purposes. See, I still lie. But there was heat. But there definitely was no AC.
In all fairness,
Right.
But it was old radiator.
a home that was built that long ago
Yeah.
in that area, there's never really heat. That thing's cold in July,
Right.
dude. Like those things are just
you got
ice
to be
boxes.
next to the old.
No, they
Right,
really
yeah.
are. Like those houses, and I've been in several of them. Like
all
they
stone.
are
Sure.
fucking cold, dude. Like they are cold all
Yeah.
the time.
So
No, it doesn't retain temperature.
So
at
that
any
was short
capacity.
lived because Cal wasn't having it.
Yeah, you were in and out in like less than 3 months,
Kids
right?
were born within like 3 months. We were out.
You moved to Conshohocken.
Moved to Conchi.
Yeah.
For if anybody's listening, don't let your girlfriend or your significant other just like pick a place. You should play a part in that because this place was worse. Than my
Oh, I
mom's
like
house.
that
Oh
place.
my God.
Yeah,
That was when I
after-
met Woods. I
after
met
painted
Woods.
it, I had to paint the whole thing. They were like, "Yeah, you can move in." I walked in. I was like,
Oh,
"Cal."
that's right, you painted it. Yeah.
It's like it's lime green.
Dude, I met
Yeah.
That's
Woods
awesome.
right
Yeah.
after his twins were born. I walked over. I like knew him. I like knew who he was. But like first time I had like formally sat down with him, maybe even in sobriety, and he had these newborn twins. I mean, brand spanking new humans. Eyes aren't even open. And he was like, Newport? And I was like, let's go. It was just
Love
like
it.
so funny. Like thinking, it like warms my heart thinking about how different life was back then.
And that's the whole name of the game. Right?
Yeah.
Is that in the moment you're like, this is like, how are we going to pull this off? But if you keep like, I talk about balance all the time.
Yeah.
And how really there is no balance. And I never try to get on like any type of like public whatever and say that like, and sound Gucci by any
Yeah,
means.
of course.
But the balance needs to be like whatever I believe in, right? So God, right? My priorities, and then everything else, right? So God, family, everything else. which everything else would be like work.
Mm-hmm.
My baseline is like everything else, my family, God, right? Which is like the complete opposite way to go about it.
Correct.
But again, when I look back and like in that time, right, the first 3, even like the first 5 years, right, of my sobriety, it very much operated like that, right? Like God, family, everything else. So when you have like that faith that everything's going to work out, I really don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to work out. And then you fast forward to where we sit today. It's like, why are we still here?
Yeah, I know.
Like, how did this happen?
How did
You know?
this happen?
Which is really interesting to see. But yeah, it was definitely different back then. It was like a 900 square foot apartment.
I was renting an apartment too at the time.
Yeah.
I had a 2-bedroom apartment, and we were expecting another kid. You know what I mean? I was walking right in. Yeah, because the twins are like between Sophia and Penelope, right? Like smack dab in the middle. So it was like life was so different. We shared a car. You know what I mean?
You didn't have a license.
I didn't have a driver's license.
Yeah.
Did they take that from you?
No, he just never went. And got
Oh,
it.
you just never-
I couldn't get it. I couldn't get it due to some
Oh, my
circumstances. And then, to be honest with you, I lived most of my life in the city. And then I met my wife, after I got sober, living in Malvern. She was like, "Yeah, buddy, you're 23 years old. It's about time." That's a whole nother story for another time.
About
the
time you get your
story.
license,
We
pal.
could really go into it. Oh, buddy, listen, you don't even want to know how I got that thing. But yeah, I
Did you ever
didn't have
make
a
that
license.
amends?
What?
You ever make that amends?
What, to the DMV? No, I haven't.
They literally tricked the system. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Really?
They
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that this guy that was walking in never had a license. They were like, "Oh, we'll just give you a renewal." I was like, "Okay."
Oh, what?
No, listen. So I'll tell the story. I'll tell the story on the podcast because, like, who
Oh my
cares?
God.
You know what I mean?
That's hilarious.
I was
man.
plugged in. I failed my driver's test around the time Samantha was pregnant with our first kid. So this is, years and years ago. And I failed it, and then I failed it again because I just would never really practice.
Right, I
I
hear
failed
ya.
on the parallel parking like every other human being, right? So we're at like our family friend's house, and the guy's like, my assistant's husband runs the Northeast Philly DMV. I'll get you a license. You just let me know the date. And I was like, all right, cool. I let him know the date. I relapse. Okay, I relapse. This is like my grand relapse that we talk about on my episode. And I missed the appointment to get my license at this Northeast Philly DMV that was supposed to be a shoo-in. Fast forward like a year later, I get sober. Right? And Samantha's like, all right, now let's get back to getting your license. I'm like, well, my permit's definitely expired, so I got to go renew my permit. Bro, I'm walking around this area right here from the CVS to the DMV. It's like 4 miles. I go get my physical at the CVS. I walk all the way to the DMV. It's like July. I'm sweating bullets, right? I pull up. I'm like, I got my physical. I'm here to renew my permit. The guy looks at me. He goes with his computer. And he looks at me and he's like, he's making me this weird face. He's like, why do you need to renew your permit if it says here that you're a licensed driver? And I was like, see you later, pal. I walked right out.
Yep.
I was so shook that I got on the train from Malvern, took it all the way down to Center City, walked into the DMV where I know they didn't care anything. I was like, hey, I need a reprint of my license. Bang.
Wow.
And I had to get it to get the job that I have today. Like, I learned how to drive driving, like out on
Nice.
the road.
Fast forward 10 years later. Would you just get a new car because you just totaled a vehicle?
I did, yeah. It's my first car accident. Yeah. It's my first car accident.
Well,
I
it
did,
was
yeah.
an act of God, though.
It was an act of
snow.
God. It was an act of God in your neck of the woods, nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know how bad that road is.
And that, I mean, listen, not to make this about you, but like another God moment, right?
Yeah.
When you got out of the car and the guy was like,
Oh, it was insane.
he's
Another
one
guy,
of
man.
us.
He was one of us.
Ah, very nice.
I literally had hit a tree and then slid off of Henry Avenue in Roxborough into some guy's driveway. And I'm like dressed to go to dinner. I'm like, I'm cool. I'm calling people. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to make it to dinner. And I'm on the phone with my insurance company, and this guy comes out. He's like, do you want to come inside? I go inside, and we just get to talking, and eventually he says, I'd offer you a beer, but I haven't had a drink in a really long time. And I go, no kidding, me neither. And he goes, how long? And I was like, coming up on 9 years, actually. And he was just like, yeah, I'm about 4. And it was like
Nice.
this whole full circle moment. And I'll tell you what, if I didn't really do a ton of damage, but if I had smacked a tree in front of somebody else's house, I'm sure the conversation would have looked a lot different.
Of course.
You know what I mean? All right, so back to you. Enough about me.
So where did I leave off? I don't even know.
Well, let me ask you this, not to get too far off track, but, we talk a lot about on this podcast, obviously, your addiction and things like that. What are you doing in recovery?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, what's going on with meetings, with sponsorship, with what you're doing in recovery to survive
today?
Yeah, now,
like now,
Mm-hmm. So I am very much like not one to like lie, like I said before, like on a public thing or whatever. So right now I am not sponsoring anybody. Although I do have one guy that I will absolutely. I can't believe it. He's been with me since the beginning, right? You actually know him. Wait, you went to Central?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Central kid.
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So my buddy Alex, he's been with me since the beginning. He just celebrated 9 years.
Nice.
But like nowadays, he's sponsoring me any given day. But as far as like new sponsees, we could go on a whole tangent on why. Really, I think it's a little bit of a laziness thing, but it's also a little bit like I don't see the newcomers that I used to, right? Like the amount of them. And that's like my own shit. But regardless of that,
I think it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning. Like life, it's cyclical. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it is.
and
but
I think
I was
if we
almost
look at,
going off the sense of like, there's a lot of like. Don't get me wrong. I was unmotivated when I came in. But there's a lot of like different unmotivated people that are super medicated.
Right.
And I have my own personal opinion on all that. Right?
Yeah.
My professional opinion is something completely different. But my personal opinion is that like, at what point does recovery start and actively using stop?
Right.
But as far as like, like finding those hobbies and like, kind of like having a very full life, right? So family is very much prevalent in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I have the side business like that we're doing like content for and things of that nature, but the gym is a huge part of my life. And then like obviously my podcast is a huge part of my life.
Sure.
'Cause you know how much work goes into it.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I've almost, and I don't know if I'm playing games with my own head, and I hope I'm not. But like I rewatched an episode the other day, and I was bawling my eyes out. And
Of
like
your
when I'm,
podcast?
yeah, and when I'm doing it, like I'm kind of very much in like interview mode.
Sure.
But so the podcast has been like a really, really cool like aspect of my life currently. And then work is 24/7. It's a lot.
as somebody who's watched you over the years, and I might put you down here for a minute so I can pull you back up if you don't mind. I've watched you quit. I've watched you get a job, then say why this job doesn't align with you, then come back to a job, then go get a different job, say why this job doesn't align with you, then come back to the same job, then do it again, okay? Then start a car detailing business, and that was going to be the next big thing, right? And if anything, we learned that Chris was going to be an absolute ace at social media through his car dealing business. Because I don't think car detailing is probably the most lucrative thing in the world.
And it was tiring.
Yeah, I'm sure.
it's very
you were doing
tiring.
it year round.
Sure.
You were driving to people's house, and you were really passionate about it because your cars are always very clean, right? And I get it. But then came this podcast that you have now, and I'm not saying for 1 second as your friend that I ever thought it wasn't going to be a huge success. I was just wondering if you were going to retain interest. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it seems like it's only just built, dude.
Yeah.
You are a dust ball in the desert right now, growing and moving
Tumbleweed.
faster. A tumbleweed. Thank you. I've never been to the desert before. I'm sorry. I just, just moving, dude. And it's building and crazy. Talk about New Lens Media, He's got a whole new separate company because he has this passion in creating content and media that stem from the podcast.
It would have never happened if we didn't have all the stuff.
Correct, dude.
But again, being okay with asking for help, right? Because much like sobriety, I am illiterate when it comes to all of this stuff. I may put on a good front, but really it's my business partner Charlie that first and foremost helped with Pain with a Purpose. And I've slowly but surely kind of learned the ins and outs of very simple stuff. But then he would go to the gym and I'm like, dude, we have all this equipment. What are we doing? And he's already a mastermind with a camera.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we need to do something, And the way that it's like transformed and kind of taken off has been really, really cool.
Well, buddy, now you're like an ace with the camera.
Well, now
I wish we could go back in time and talk to those people that were like, haha, Billy Madison. Like, fuck them, dude. You're like an artist now, bro. I see you get down, and you got big legs. Get down on your knees and like take photos of puppies, high school basketball games. You literally covered an entire high school football season for the most part,
Wow.
right? Just for documentation purposes. The podcast, he's got drones. The guy's flying drones over the Schuylkill. You know what I mean? Yeah, like all the time. And he'll go out there at like inconvenient times. He'll go out there at like 4:45 on a Wednesday and like park his car off at Kelly and just be there like flying this thing around. And that's what I'm saying. He's the tumbleweed. Like it's spinning and like I see you. Not saying because I don't want to allude to the fact that I see you like give up on stuff. I just see you really finding something you're truly passionate
It's
about.
a really good point. I've been the same way my whole life, like with school, with like any passion projects. The cool thing about sobriety is that like we can be whatever we want.
Yeah.
Right. And I've also in my sobriety gotten to a point, and I don't know when it happened for you, Van, or maybe you never had it, where I very much cared about like what everybody, more importantly, would say about me, rather than like what I would say about myself. And like I lived my life in fear, even in sobriety for a long time, about what you thought about me or what I thought you thought about me. And most recently over the last 2-3 years, I'm like, I could care less.
Good for you. That takes, for some people, it takes a long time to shake that.
Yeah. Well, it did. It took me a really long time. But at the end of the day, if I I had this whole internal process, but it's like, if I start a podcast and people give negative feedback, right? The way that it works is like you're still getting feedback. So now I'm reaching more people. The cool part about Pain with a Purpose is that we all know about like the 12 traditions as well, right? But it's also 2025.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not sitting here saying that I directly disagree with the 12 traditions, right? Because like they literally have built they protect a program that absolutely allowed me to like live a life.
I like the fifth one, though, where we continue to strive to help the addict or alcoholic that suffers.
Oh, absolutely.
Like we can never stop living by the fifth tradition.
I think you're referencing like anonymity as a whole, right?
That, and also like, like I'm absolutely not in here, like talking about like, asking everybody to reach out, right? Or like, let me get you sober, or any of that stuff. Right. Attraction rather than promotion, but the world and social media and like the internet it's not going anywhere.
No.
And I think that like if I have figured out a way to like reach more individuals, and it's not about me or money or anything, it's very much about like just like reaching one person that might need to see a reel. Like, oh my God, I remember Woods like stole my cell phone in high school.
Yeah.
The fact that he's able to live today a successful, half decent life, like. I got to like look more into it, right? And whether they reach out to me or they just kind of like reach out on their own and do their own thing.
Sure.
That's what the whole thing is, right? Because putting out like a message to like the general public is always going to be much bigger than me. So I'm very careful about like what I say and whether I try to sound like good or bad or anything. Because like I just want to give people the real deal. Like, yeah, I've been sober for 10 years. There's been years where I went and did nothing. There's been years where I did like everything. There's been years where I struggled with mental health. There's been years where I just like, whatever it looked like. But I do appreciate the kind words, because like the cool thing about like the podcast and the media stuff is that I've just like gotten some weird passion for it now.
Buddy, this is your thing because it's your passion.
Yeah.
You're so much more passionate about this than, I'm not saying
I mean, the cars were good.
The cars were good. You did a nice job detailing
But
the cars, but
I couldn't be a dad, right? Because I would get home and I was smoked. I was so
we
tired.
would have lunch on a Friday and you'd be like, I got an Escalade at 2:30. That's going to take me till 7 to do.
That's a tough gig.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, tough gig.
And it's cool to see that this has, like, that came to a screeching halt because of the weather, right? But like, you damn well know that when it got warm out again, you were like,
well, I remember having conversations and people were like, when you starting back up? I'm like, to be honest, I'm not really looking
good.
at it.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not. Now the hard part is that people still reach out like through like Google and whatever, and they're like, you still detailing cars?
You
And I'm
got
like,
a guy?
Yeah, and I'm like, no, I'm not.
Go out and follow You Got a Guy on all social media platforms.
Well, I mean, it's cool to see the lineage of like where the content stuff really started.
Of course.
And all that stuff was from an iPhone.
I know. I remember.
But yeah, so Pain with a Purpose started, and like life's been really cool. I've been able to connect with people that
Nice.
you know, I do a little bit of like cold calling or cold messaging, like in my free time to like try to connect with other people. But like I've had like numbers of people like come in from Florida and hearing their story and hearing, because like I was never sent to Florida, right? So I didn't know. I heard the stories about recovery in Florida, but like I never.
Yeah.
Everybody that I've had on, they're like, yeah, those people weeded they weeded themselves out. I don't even know the correct term. You know, sooner rather than not, right? And there's still really good recovery down there. And seeing that it's still very much a community down there has been like such a breath of fresh air.
Oh, yeah. I always say where there's a lot of treatment, there's bad treatment. You know what I mean?
Of course.
But there's also really, really good treatment.
There's really good. Well,
Where-
aside from the treatment, there's really good recovery.
Oh, yeah.
You
That's what I mean.
If you look at, let's say somebody coming from this area, the greater Philadelphia area, and you go down to Florida for treatment and you go to a decent treatment center, you know nothing but treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it creates good recovery.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing down, like if you lived in Florida, it would be a little different. But you live 1,000 miles away, technically, you get plugged in automatically when you're in Florida. Then you get into Florida meetings, Florida sober living. So it creates great recovery.
Yeah. And
I
no
know a
one's
lot
from
of people
there,
that still
you
live
know?
there.
Yeah.
I know
they all
people
stay
that
there.
still live there, and God bless them because they're still alive. They come back up here, they may have a problem.
I actually had somebody on a few episodes ago, and I thought that her story was very much like what we're talking about. Like she was from this area and essentially got shipped down there. She's from 2 blocks away from where she got sober in Florida.
That's listen.
Really?
And I was like, hold on. I was like, so you and she walked me through all of it, right? And because of like good, and I can say this confidently, like good recovery, right? She's able to not only still be friends with the people that she grew up with,
Nice.
right? Who are not like us, that indulge however the normal way would be. And then also have her support network, right? That she also still very much like incorporates in her daily life. And she lives like the fullest life ever. I remember saying it. I was like, I looked at your Instagram and I was like, does this girl work? Because she's always in the water. She's always deep sea diving. She's always doing the coolest shit that like I'll never probably experience to that extent because of where I live. But yeah, so like recovery's everywhere. And it was really cool to hear that, you know, she got, not only did she grow up there, but she got sober there, stayed there, and has been sober. She got sober at 19.
I mean, brother, listen, you could say the same about yourself. You grew up around here and got sober here. You know
Well,
what
I mean, and I failed to see, I went to Croydon.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah.
But same, yeah.
I did 27 days in Florida, came right back to my house in South Philly.
Yeah.
Went to the South Philly group
SPG.
on Tasker and Moy Mensing.
Yes,
and,
sir.
Yeah, I mean, but I came right back. But I had a great full-time job. There was everything to come back to. You know what I mean? So I plugged myself in with meetings and a sponsor, and everything just worked coming back home.
I always think about what my life would be like if I would have had the opportunity to go down and get sober in Florida. And the probable result is I would probably be dead or in jail. You know what I mean?
I think honestly I would be in jail.
For sure, because it's just such a different lifestyle. And I don't know, I like living where we live. I've lived as far away as Baltimore, and that's 100 miles south. You know what I mean? It's way different, dude. It is. It was way different for me.
Especially today, right? Because we got to take our shots where we can.
Yeah.
I mean, big day today.
Big day today.
Birds just won the
Big
Super
day
Bowl.
Go Birds.
You know, so like what better place to be than right here, right now?
I know.
That's right.
I drove down Broad Street yesterday to go get a hoagie tray, and it's so funny that I sort of was granted maybe an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl this year, and I looked over at my 9-year-old daughter, and she was like, yeah, you should go. But she and I watch every Eagles game together, and I opted to just stay home and watch it with her, and it was unreal.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, Gracie and Maddie now know like the players' names, and
Yeah,
they're
that's
fixated
cool.
on Saquon Barkley. Or,
Oh, brother,
right?
I had
Oh,
to
yeah.
explain to them what a fair catch was yesterday, you know?
And it's just like it's so cool to see them. You know, like what are we really talking about right now? Like we're junkies.
I know.
You know what I mean? And like the fact that like recovery is like afforded me an unmerited gift, really. Afforded me a life, one that I never wanted, right? Like I never wanted kids, a wife, any of that stuff. But like to be able to notice shit like that, I just wanted to not be sick anymore.
Yeah. I wanted my mom to let me stay upstairs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And get off my back.
So as like corny as it might seem, if anybody's listening, and the only reason I say it is because I literally thought it, right? Where it was like, what are they talking about? I just wanted a better job, like a little bit of a savings account, a girlfriend,
Cool shoes and a cool car. Yeah.
Girlfriend that I could have mainly for, that like I could bring around my family, and then a couple other girlfriends.
Yeah.
The basic stuff.
Yeah.
That's like the life that I wanted, right?
That was as good as you thought it could get.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now to look back and like see that like we've been in our house for over 5 years.
I know.
Wow.
What?
I know.
I'm
Got
talking
in
about interest rates, and I'm judging you. I'm like, oh, well, you should have got in before.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Like,
right.
I didn't know how to make a phone payment. My mom was making my phone payment for the first like year and a half that I was living in sober living, right? And if it wasn't for like good recovery, I would have never made it. But it still absolutely exists, whether it's here, Florida, Timbuktu, like it's around.
It's so funny.
It's
how
everywhere.
Your values have just completely. They just really transform. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The love I have for my family today is something I never thought I could love something more than myself, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And the way my priority, especially as I like kind of shift through my 30s and I can see my kids getting older and being less and less interested in what I want to do, like, thank God we don't take these years for granted. You know, like
You
I know
shouldn't.
you. I know you pick them up and take them to soccer practice. I know you were heavily involved in everything.
Yeah, I never
all
missed a
three of your
game.
kids-
I never tried not to miss a practice. I would literally leave work, go back, but I would never miss anything. An ice hockey game, a football game, nothing, because you don't get these years back. I don't know, how old are your kids?
About to be 8.
8. I mean, you don't. Those are great years.
And the only reason I know is because when we were walking down here, you said how old your oldest is, right? But
My youngest is 26.
So they've never seen you drink or drug.
They've never, ever,
Right.
my wife, people I know now, they've never, ever seen me impaired,
Yeah.
which is incredible. There's
a
people
gift.
out there in South Philly that are still alive that,
That
know
have,
the old
yeah.
thing. But,
Yeah.
for the most part, I mean, some of the people are dead.
Yeah.
But it's been so long that, I mean, my 9-year drinking and drugging career is completely outshadowed by
by your sobriety.
my 38 and a half years of
Yeah.
being sober and 32 years of being in this business, of helping other people,
Unbelievable.
And that's the truth, right? Is that so I was at a golf outing the other day. Not the other day, maybe 6-7 months ago.
The other day.
Whatever.
The one I was with you at?
That's great.
The sober shootout.
Yeah, in Bluebell?
Yeah, how long ago was that? Don't say a year.
That was
It was a long time.
July.
That
But
was
it was
in
the other day.
September of
It was the
2024.
other day.
Yeah.
But-
That's the other day
wasn't
to
that
me. I get what you're saying.
So,
with that.
and like, I forget the damage that I caused, right?
Mhm.
Because there was one foursome there that were all people that I grew up with, right? And they're normal,
yeah.
right? They don't suffer the way that I do. And as the day progressed, right, they continued to tie one on. Happy for them, whatever. And at the end, when I was saying goodbye to everybody, I stopped by the bar and I, say goodbye to everybody, and it started. Right. And they were like, yeah, we see you walking around here like a big shot. Immediately, shot after shot. I'm taking them. I'm like, all right, fellas, I get it. I deserve it.
Jeez, okay. Wow.
But then eventually we got to this one individual that's currently living on the streets on Ridge Ave. And I absolutely, I'm not God, so I don't think I ever got anybody hooked on drugs, right? But I definitely didn't help the situation.
Yeah.
And he's still out there, and what this person doesn't know is that we've helped this person a ton of times. We've scholarshiped them. We've done a ton of things, right?
Yeah.
Over and above, right? But at the end of the day, they were like, you would think that you would like pour a little bit more energy. Like that's the one that, and I left that situation and I'm like, fuck, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's just the one that he's aware of, right? There's still a ton of other people that know me from my drinking and drugging, that like, they didn't always speak well about me. I don't speak well about myself, right? But like, it takes me back to like the third step, right? Where it's like I'm here to do his work, right? Like my life really, as much as I wake up in my baseline, is none of my concern.
Yeah.
And I need to be like recentered daily with that stuff.
Multiple times a day sometimes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, brother, listen, this was great.
Yeah,
This was an awesome podcast. We really, really appreciate you coming on. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, Chris has his own podcast called Pain with a Purpose. You should look it up. Check out the episodes. They're really inspiring. I promise you. Check it out. Any closing thoughts? Any last words?
No. I appreciate you guys having me on. Keep doing the good deal, right? As much as like it's a lot of work.
Yeah, sure.
The truth of the matter is, and I say it often on my podcast, it's like I don't care if one person or a million people are watching. I care less. It's very much like a meeting in the sense it's not a meeting, but like it's very much in the sense where it's like you're not only giving a person a place to like speak freely, but you're also putting out like more good in the world, right? And when has that ever gone wrong? So yeah, I do appreciate you guys having me on. I selfishly envy the setup here. I'm hoping that I can maybe, because I'm still on my baseline where I'm like, how can I make my way with this nice little roadcaster here without them noticing?
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
Great having you on, man. Take us home, Sam.
All right. Well, with that, I'll say I'm Sam. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
Vinny, alcoholic and addict.
I'm Chris. I'm an alcoholic.
My man. And this is Tenacious Recovery. You got to be tenacious about your recovery if you want to stay sober. We really enjoyed having Chris on. And